Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're doing lesson 3.4, rounding decimals. Before we get started, we should review the rounding rules. So remember, we're going to underline the digit that we want to round, and then we're going to look to the digit to the right. If that digit to the right is less than 5, so if it's a 4, 3, 2, 1, or 0, we're going to keep that number that we're rounding the same. And if the number to the right is a 5 or greater, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, we're going to bump the number that we're rounding up 1. So again, we're going to underline the digit that we want to round, look to the digit to the right. If it's less than 5, you're going to keep it the same. If it's 5 or greater, we're going to bump it up to the next number. In lesson 3.4, the first problem that we have is the gold frog of South America is one of the smallest frogs in the world. It is 386 thousandths of an inch long. What is the length rounded to the nearest hundredth? So as we go down here, here's our number written in place value form. And with rounding, we're going to want to make sure that we underline the digit that we are rounding. So we wanted to round it to the nearest hundredth. So we are underlining the hundredths place. We are then going to look to the digit to its right. The digit to the right, if it is less than 5, it keeps the 8 the same. If it's greater than 5, it's going to bump the 8 up 1. 6 is greater than 5, so we are going to bump this 8 up to a 9. Now, when you round, everything in front of that digit stays the same. So the 3 stays the same, our decimal point is still there, there's still a 0 in the ones place. But when we round, everything behind that digit turns to a 0. So this 6 would then turn into a 0. But here is the key to today's lesson. When you round with decimals, we do not need the extra zeros behind the place that we are rounding. So we are going to get rid of every number behind the place value that we are rounding. So since we're rounding to the hundredths place, we are going to drop all numbers behind the hundredths place. So our answer is just going to be 39 hundredths, because we're not going to have any extra zeros left behind. If we look at example A down here at the bottom, what is the length of the frog rounded to the nearest hundredth here? Okay, so we have 437 thousandths, and we're going to round it to the nearest hundredth. So we're going to go ahead and write 437 thousandths. We want to round it to the hundredths place. So that's the 3. The 3 looks to the 7. Because 7 is bigger than 5, we're going to round the 3 up to a 4. Everything in front is going to stay the same, and everything behind will drop off. So again, 44 hundredths is rounded to the nearest hundredth. If we take the same number, 437 thousandths, and round it to the nearest tenth, so it's key that you know your place values. The tenths is this 4. The 4 looks to the 3. The 3 is less than 5, so it's going to tell the 4 to stay the same. Everything in front stays the same, and everything behind the tenths place will drop off. Which means when we round it to the nearest tenth, we have 4 tenths. 4 tenths. So you can hear it as we write our numbers. If we're rounding to the hundredths place, our number should be ending in the hundredths. And if we're rounding to the tenths, we should only have numbers back to the tenths place. On the next page, the Goliath frog is the largest frog in the world. It is found in the country of Cameroon in West Africa. The Goliath frog can grow to be 11 and 815 thousandths of an inch. How long is the Goliath frog to the nearest inch? So we are rounding to the nearest inch, which means we are rounding to the ones place. So if it says round to the nearest inch or round to the nearest whole number, that is the ones place. So we want to write this length of the frog in 11 and 815 thousandths. And we're going to underline the ones place because that's the place value we're rounding to. We're going to look to the digit to the right. So we're looking to the tenths place. Now again, all we're looking for is that number 5 or bigger, or is that number to the right below 5, a 4, 3, 2, 1, or 0. In this case, it's an 8, so it's bigger than 5. So it's going to tell that 1 to round up to a 2. Everything in front stays the same, so we have the 1 out in front in the tens place. And we're not going to have a decimal place at all in this because there will be no numbers behind the ones place. So our answer is just going to be about 12 inches. So we're rounding to the whole number. That means there will be only whole numbers, no decimals. All right, we have 14 and 603 thousandths. And we want to round it to the nearest hundredth. So again, we're rounding the hundredths place. This is a 0 here. We want to look to the digit to the right. The 3 tells the 0 to stay the same. So we're going to leave the 0 the same. Everything in front is also going to stay the same. So we should have 14.60. The 3 would turn to a 0, but it's going to drop off. In this case, and it's a rare case, we have to leave the 0 in the hundredths place. Because we are rounding to the hundredths place, we must have a digit in the hundredths place. Because this would read 14 and 60 hundredths. So if you're rounding a digit that would round to a 0, you have to leave that 0. All the other numbers behind it will go away. But in this case, you have to leave the 0 in the hundredths place because that is the place we're rounding to. If I take the same number, 14 and 603 thousandths, and this time I want to round to the whole number place value. Remember, whole number place value means the ones. We're going to underline the 4. That's in the ones place. Look to the digit to the right. The digit to the right is a 6, which is bigger than 5. It's going to tell the 4 to bump up to a 5. And then the 1 in the tens place will come with it. Everything behind the decimal point goes away. So our answer is just 15. On the next page here, the share and show, write the place value of the underlined digit, round each number to the place of the underlined digit. So first we're going to name the place value. Okay, so this will be key. If you need to look back to your place value chart, you can. But name the place value that is underlined, and then we're going to round it to that place value. So in number 1, the 7 is rounded, or the 7 is underlined. The 7 is in the hundredths place. Because the 6 is in the tenths, the 7 would be in the hundredths. So we're going to round the 7. The 7 looks to the 3. The 3 tells the 7 to stay the same, because again, it says stay the same because it's less than a 5. So we're going to leave the 7 the same. The 6 stays, the decimal point and the 0. Everything behind that 7 would go away. So we would have an answer of 67 hundredths. 67 hundredths. Number 2. The 2 is underlined. That is in the tenths place. So we're rounding the tenths place. We look to the hundredths where the 8 is at. The 8 tells the 2 to bump up to a 3 because it's bigger than a 5. We leave the decimal point in the 4 there. Everything else goes away. So we have an answer of 4 3/10. Because we're rounding to the tenths place, our answer ends in the tenths place, 4 3/10. Number 3, the 2 is in the ones place. So we're rounding to the nearest whole number. The 2 looks to the tenths place where the 9 is at. The 9 tells the 2 to bump up to a 3. So 12 917 thousandths is close to 13. And that's how we're going to round it. Nothing behind the decimal point, just the number 13. On 4, 5, and 6, now we're just going to name the place value that it was rounded to. So this number here was rounded to a place value and got that answer. Now, for these, the trick is, remember, every time that we rounded up here to a place value, there was no digit, there wasn't any digit that was behind the place value that we rounded to. So here we rounded the hundredths. The hundredths was the last place that gets a digit. In this one, we did the tenths. There is not any number behind the tenths place. And here we rounded to the ones. And again, the ones place is the last digit that it was rounded to. So the shortcut for these problems is just simply look where the last digit is at, and that is the place value it's rounded to. So on number 4, this was rounded to the hundredths place because the last digit is in the hundredths place. The 8 is in the hundredths place. So if we looked over here, we could say, well, the 8 was rounded. The 2 told the 8 to stay the same. Therefore, it's 98 hundredths. But we also can just see that because it's the last place that has a digit, the hundredths place. On number 5, 3 695 thousandths was rounded to 4. It was rounded to the ones place because the 4 is in the ones place, and that's the only place value that has a digit in it. So it was rounded to the ones. On number 6, 7 486 thousandths was rounded to 7 5/10. 7 5/10. The last place that we have a digit is the tenths place. So therefore, this number was rounded to the tenths place. And if we look, the 4 would look to the 8. And the 8 would tell the 4 to bump up to a 5. So therefore, it's 7 5/10. Go ahead and press pause, and I want you to complete 7 through 15 on your own, and then when you hit play again, we'll review the answers. All right, now that you have completed those problems, here are the answers. On number 7, the 5 is in the tenths place, so it rounds to 6/10. On number 8, it's in the ones place. The 6 looks to the 5. The 5 tells it to bump up to a 7. A number 9, the 0 is in the hundredths place. The 9 tells the 0 to bump up to a 1. Number 10, the 3 is in the tenths place. The other 3 tells it to stay the same, 3 3/10. On number 11, the 0 is in the tenths place. The 7 tells the 0 to bump up to a 1, 12 1/10. On number 12, the 9 is in the hundredths place. It looks to the 4. The 4 tells the 9 to stay the same, 4 49 hundredths. Number 13 was rounded to the hundredths place because that's where the 3 is at in 33 hundredths. Also, you can look, the 2 looks to the 8. The 8 tells the 2 to bump up to a 3. Number 14 was also rounded to the hundredths place. The 0 looked to the 7. The 7 told it to bump up. And we also know it's the hundredths place because it's 2 61 hundredths. So the last place it has a digit is in the hundredths place. On number 15, we have 13, which is the ones place. That 3 is in the ones place. The 2 looked to the 5. The 5 told it to bump up to a 3. So we have 13. We can also do questions 16, 17, and 18 here. All we're doing is taking the same number, 16 748 thousandths, and rounding it to 3 different place values. So we will round it to the tenths, then the hundredths, and then the ones. So if we round this to the tenths, that would be the 7. The 7 looks to the 4, and the 4 tells the 7 to stay the same. So if we rounded this to the tenths, it would be 16, and the 7 would stay the same. So 16 7/10. If we want to bump this over to the hundredths place, the 4 is in the hundredths place, and it looks to the 8. The 8 tells the 4 to bump up. So we're going to bump it up to 16 75 hundredths, because the 4 should bump up to a 5. 16 75 hundredths. If we were rounding to the ones place, that would be the 6. The 6 looks to the 7 in the tenths place, and the 7 tells the 6 to bump up. So we're going to round this just to 17. 16 748 thousandths would round to 17, and that would be the ones place. All right, that ends our lesson. You can move on to your homework. If you have any questions, please email me or message myself or Mrs. Loddick. Great work today. Have a good day.